see so many familiar faces.
Good to be seen.
Well, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining Maccabi USA at home for the Rugby Corner with Dallen Stanford. Before we begin, I just want to ask that everybody please mute your microphones. I definitely encourage you, please submit questions for our guests in the chat box. We'll get to as many questions as time permits. I want to take a moment to introduce our guest moderator tonight. David Rudzinsky is a Maccabi USA alum. He is a player, coach, and he's currently the chairman for Maccabi USA Rugby, defending gold medal champions, Maccabi USA Rugby. David, thanks for being here tonight. Thanks for organizing. It's all you.
All right. Welcome. Wow. This is very exciting. Good to see so many people here. And again, we've all been doing these Zoom conferences nonstop. So hopefully this will be one of your more fun Zoom conferences. Before I introduce Dallen, I did want to talk about Shane and the team at Maccabi USA and what they've been doing with these programs. And I do want to thank everyone there. They continue to do this nonstop every day. They continue to talk about getting us to Israel for the next games, and they haven't stopped one bit. So we really want to thank Shane and the crew down in Philly and all over, because they're virtual crew now. So I'm going to introduce Dallen, but everyone knows Dallen because he's probably one of the most well-known rugby personalities in America and now around the world a bit. And so it is an absolute pleasure to have Dallen with us tonight and to introduce this legend who he gets to say all the things about everyone else. But, you know, for those of you that don't know Dallen well, I mean, he's a former international rugby player, played for USA, played sevens, and he's currently a commentator internationally. And Dallen was also the captain of the gold medal sevens team at the 2013 World Maccabiah, and MVP as well, and also led the team to bronze in 15s. He was also player coach, I would say, captain of the Pan Am 2015 Pan Am Games, and they won sevens gold and silver in 15s. Dallen has a long career on the, we call it the Sevens circuit, but the series, the World Series. And this past year, I know for a fact that, you know, I was following the World Cup so closely and going to Japan. Dallen was on some of the biggest matches at the 2019 World Cup in Japan. So it was amazing. This guy is quick on his feet as a player and even faster as a talker on the mic. And he's the king of one-liners and nicknames, and everyone, we're going to hear about a lot of things like that tonight. But for those guys that know him, we're going to, you know, because he's become a commentator now, he's the silver-tongued slippery eel. So I'm going to turn it over to the silver-tongued slippery eel, Dallen. And, you know, we're going to start it out a little bit, Dallen, with how'd you get here and how'd this whole thing start? I don't think all these guys know your rugby background in South Africa and the caliber of rugby you were playing over there as a schoolboy, and then sort of coming up into you deciding to come to the U.S. So,
well, firstly, thanks for having us. You know, thanks for joining us, everybody. Buzzy, you're a legend yourself, my friend, and good to see so many familiar faces on the Zoom call. A lot of teammates that I've played with over the years, some alumni, some supporters, even the first Eagles coach, Mr. Cornwall, on here. Really, really cool to see everybody there, including my mother-in-law, who's tuning in from the East Coast, who was my sponsor when I came to the US. So far it's worked out well. But to answer your question about growing up in South Africa, I was given a rugby ball basically before I was even born. It's the soccer and rugby and cricket are the main sports played there. And it was a way of life, right? And my grandfather was a very keen player, but he got injured at a young age. And him and my mom were always advocating playing sports and team sports in that nature. And rugby was just one of the beautiful ones we played. I was fortunate enough to go to a high school that thrived on its sports. And so I'll never forget going down on a Saturday morning. You'd go at 8 in the morning to the fields, and there'll be 8 different sports fields on the go from under 8 rugby, and each age group had about 5 to 6 teams, under 8, A, B, C, D, E, F, all the way down. And you go all the way and watch until the under 19 A side played. And so it was just a brilliant upbringing, supporting everybody else. And then, of course, getting to play with several other legends on the field. It was absolutely brilliant. I was always keen on my sports, played a ton of them. Rugby was my main one, but I just wanted to, travel and experience the world using sport as that vehicle. And it so happened that I knew I wasn't going to play for South Africa after I got to university, and I tackled the Springbok rugby coach at a big event. That's probably a story for another night, but just put it this way, I really enjoyed the off-field as much as I did the on-field shenanigans. And so then when I came to the US, that's kind of where things changed pretty quickly for me there, Buzzy.
So you got to the US, funny talker, rugby player, everyone wants you on their team. And how'd you get noticed by the USA Sevens guys?
Well, firstly, I suppose my first introduction to the US, I came here in 2003 on a holiday visa. I had a South African friend of mine that went to the same university, University of Cape Town, and he was playing here for a Division II club called the Occidental Old Boys. And so I arrived here and I played Division II rugby, had a brilliant time and a great experience. But then the real thing that sold me on rugby in the States was the 7-a-side season. Back in South Africa, we played one 7-a-side tournament a year at the end of the year, and that was it. Now, for me as a smaller rugby player in South Africa, going against these farmers, who are 290 pounds each, looking to take your head off, 15-a-side rugby, while it was fun, you had to be elusive and evasive. And you couldn't get past all 15, right? But in sevens, you could step a few like a park car and get through and score. So coming to the US, there was a 2-month summer 7 season here in California. And I had the best time of my life and really fell in love with rugby and sevens, particularly again. That rugby club offered me a 1.5-year visa to come back the following year. And that's when I got a chance to play a bit more sevens. In fact, then that's where I met my wife to be. And so we got a chance to be invited to the national sevens tournament. So top 16 teams in the country. And up until that point, I didn't even know there was a higher level of sevens. I just was playing in Southern California. And every tournament we'd play this team from San Diego called Ombak in the final, and they would beat us by about a try. So we were like, oh, we've done so well, but just lost out to them. We didn't realize that this team Ombak had a bunch of US Eagles and they would go and finish first or second in the country. So when we qualified finally for the national tournament, we played against teams that were of a brilliant level, but we prepared well because we played against this Ombak side. So I think we came 5th or 6th the first year. And that's when the US coach, Al Caravelli, came to a few of us and invited us to tryouts. And I actually turned him down. I said, thanks so much, Al. This is a brilliant opportunity, but you can hear by my accent, I'm South African. And then he said, listen, you've been in the country for 3 years. You married an American citizen. You're becoming a citizen yourself soon. So you haven't played for South Africa. And I want you to come to try out. So a bunch of us tried for his side. And among those names, if you follow rugby, you'll know like Taku Ngwenya, who scored probably the most famous try in 15-a-side World Cup history for the USA. Todd Clever, Chris Wiles, a lot of those guys. So we all played together. And for me, it was surreal because I didn't think you could represent another country, not having been here that long.
Well, I think USA recruits like that anyway. We know that. They're looking around and saying, who can become an American rugby player? So that guy, you got onto the circuit, and I think you really probably understood a little bit more about American rugby having lived through some D2 American rugby, because that's really down more at the grassroots type level. D2 rugby is nowhere near probably what your high school rugby was in South Africa. But, as you got to the circuit and training with the USA, I take it most of the guys at that time were part-time rugby players, and full-time they did something else, because I know we didn't have the contracts at the Olympic Training Center back then. So was that the case? Were you guys doing other things?
Yeah, so that's a great point, Buzzy. A lot of people, they think about international sport or international sports people as full-time. Now, at the time, we were working other jobs. I was working for an IT company. The owner was a South African guy, and so he knew that I'd be traveling on the Sevens World Series. But imagine that, right? For all of us, you tell your boss, I'm gone for 3 weeks, and then I come back for a month and I go for 3 weeks again. It was very tricky. And then you're trying to support your family at the same time as well. So I'll give you some inside story to it. So basically you'd get an email or a call from the coach to say you've been invited to try out for the Hong Kong tour. You go fly to San Diego and you train against all the other players there. About 24 players would be training at the training camp. And you knew only 12 could travel. So 24 battling out every single day. Al Carabelli had the most brutal fitness testing of the time. He tried to mimic what New Zealand did in the game of sevens, and New Zealand were number one, and we weren't even a core team, meaning we didn't play in every tournament on the series. Back then, there were 8 tours around the world, and we only did 3. So we did LA, it was San Diego then, San Diego, Hong Kong, and New Zealand. And so for us, we had to work full-time jobs, train in the evening or early mornings, and then fly down a week before the tournament, battle each other out. And if you were left standing, you probably made the team. And then you went on the tour to play against everybody else on the world. And for them, all they did was play rugby. So I remember chatting to the South African guys, and they were like, we get $100,000 a year, and rugby is what we do. And I was like, well, we get $100 a day when you make the team. And outside of that, we are full-time in whatever other job we're trying to do. And so they would kind of laugh at that. And it was kind of crazy because we lost to South Africa and won San Diego tournament 15-14. And it just shows you that we weren't full time then. And so we had to work harder and smarter to try to compete with these sides. And we did well enough to be invited the following year to play in 6 tournaments in the World Series and then 8 the next year. So my wife, Sham, I really felt, because she was like, you got to slow down your traveling. But meanwhile, we were doing so well in the sevens, it was actually doubling every year. And then we had the Sevens World Cup in the 3rd year as well in 2009. So there was definitely a lot of travels, but amazing memories.
Yeah, and look where USA is now. Full-time professional rugby players on the sevens. They've been ranked as high as #1 last year for quite a bit, and winning tournaments and really looking good and hopeful as Olympic medalists. What do you think? You think we got a shot?
Yes, absolutely. I think what's really exciting is that the progression the US has made in sevens, and a lot of people ask me or ask folks, when will the USA be able to compete in the 15-a-side game with the top 10 sides in the world on a consistent basis? And the answer is probably 10 years away for that, in my honest opinion. But with professional rugby like Major League Rugby kicking off, year 3, coming up to year 4, that's very exciting. But sevens is the one where everybody can compete, and the US in particular, finishing 2nd last year, the men and the women. And this year has been a up and down one because a couple of players have got injured. But I think actually this break, particularly for the USA side, will do the US well. And a medal is really on the cards, and that is really the tipping point in rugby here in America, is having the US men or women or both medal at the Olympic Games, and then we'll see the game explode. But the athletes that have come through, like the Perry Bakers of the world, the Colin Isles, all the American-grown players, that's what you want to see, and young people can watch those new idols and try to imitate them in years to come.
Danny Barrett, prefer those kind of guys.
Yeah.
He's a rugby player, not just a track star. All right, so I want to ask you a couple of things about your favorites. So a bunch of favorites while you were as a player, though, because I know it changes as a commentator, and just with USA Sevens, or even in those playing days, do you have a favorite tourney or a stadium, and maybe favorite try scored or some of your toughest opponents? Let's talk about favorites first, and then we'll talk about the tough guys.
Yeah, so favorite tournaments. My very first tournament ever was playing in Westpac Stadium in Wellington, New Zealand. It's called the Cake Tin. And I remember watching the Wellington Hurricanes play, a bunch of brilliant Kiwis representing the Canes in New Zealand. So it was really special for me to run out as my very first cap ever for the US at that stadium. And back then in Wellington, they had about 40,000 attend. Most of them were pretty much in the bag with a few drinks, but they really enjoyed their rugby as well. But my 2 favorites stand out to me on a different level. It's because I had family members attend, and that was the San Diego Sevens in 2007. My side of the family flew in from South Africa when my dad was still around as well. So my dad and my mom were there watching, and then my father-in-law and mother-in-law, they were still trying to track what was going on in the games. They had no idea, but it was just absolutely brilliant. I'd have my wife there and her sister. That was really special moments. And then playing in South Africa, my gran, who was still around back then, she came to watch as well. And that was really great, having the whole family there watching. And my friends who they still couldn't believe I was wearing a USA jersey.
And was that right in Cape Town?
No, it wasn't actually, Buzzy. That was a good question too. That was in George, South Africa. So it was a much smaller location just outside of Cape Town. But it was less the stadium and more the people that came,
Yeah, and Wellington, we've heard all about the stories of the Wellington years, and that's why New Zealand Rugby decided it in World Rugby, it was a bad idea to have the tournament in Wellington, so now it's not there anymore.
Yes, exactly. So, but other favorites, Buzz, I will say playing in Hong Kong is probably the most iconic stadium for sevens because it's got an unbelievable dome that comes up, fireworks that go off after the tournament. And that also, as a youngster growing up, especially watching sevens, Hong Kong is the ultimate, the home of sevens, if you will. And so to be able to play there, I went there as a fan in 2005. We played in the tens tournament with a local USA side that I went with. And so a few years later, to be able to represent the Eagles and play at that tournament, that was very, very special. And scoring tries, I didn't score that many tries at the international level. And so for me, it was probably more about being the link person as the scrum half fly half. But I did get a chance to score in San Diego when my family was there on both sides. So that was kind of nice.
Well, that's a good point. And for, young Jacob, who I know posted a question about your favorite try ever and some of that, I do want to echo what Dallen said. As a young rugby player, as a rugby player in general, you should get as much satisfaction out of watching your buddy score in the corner or someone else score than maybe watching someone who doesn't score a lot of tries like a prop or, someone else get the try. It's a good feeling. So I like that as well. Assists.
Exactly. And Buzz, I will say growing in South Africa, it was all about tackling back then. Because again, I told you we're playing against these larger farming communities, South African rugby players. So I actually used to wear one of those helmets, a scrum cap, and I'd launch myself diving at people because I was so small. I wouldn't really hurt myself. I'd mainly try to take them out, So defensively was always very important. But in sevens, wow, it's very tough to defend some brilliant players.
Let's think about that. Yeah. I watch the sevens all the time. I watch. I've been to Hong Kong, amazing. You're what, 145 pounds soaking wet and maybe 155, then 60. And you're out there tackling guys who are 6'4", 260, running. They run as fast at 40 as some small, skinny guys. How are you doing that?
Yeah, well, Buzz, I will say I didn't test very well when we came to the tryouts in terms of here in the States, it's a lot of it about is your time, right? So Al Crevelli, our coach, was timing our 100 meters, our 60 meters, our fitness tests and everything else. I did really well on the fitness because you can work on that yourself. And my core skills were good because that's something you can focus on. But your speed, you can try to get a little bit faster, but if you're not going to run sub 10, you're not going to do that, right? So I wouldn't place very well in that. But when it came to the game, I did a lot better because I can choose my angles of running and lines of support and your timing and your vision. You can't teach somebody new to rugby vision straight away. If you can give them a ball and they can run the 100 meters in 9 seconds, that's great. But if they don't know how to evade people or where to be or that sort of thing, that's very tough, So I suppose one thing I'm really thankful for is as a young player are the coaches I had. All the coaches were absolutely instrumental in giving me all those skills. And so when I became a coach, I also try to focus on educating everybody in the right tackle technique. That's very important. Any player can tackle any player in any given day. And in fact, the bigger the player is, the easier it is to tackle them because you can get lower and you can lift them slightly and place them on the ground nicely. So it's all about technique, I would say, for that. Now, saying that, there have been times I've been absolutely stepped and left standing because I was a sweeper in sevens, which is a great position when they kick through or somebody fumbles a ball, you get to pick it up and step and run. But when you're the last defender and they have the whole width of the field to attack and they're running at 9 seconds, 100 meters, it was tough to defend, I'll say.
So I would bet you've stepped more guys than they have stepped you, but you've probably been run over more times than you've run over guys.
Well, Buzz, I will say, I actually haven't been run over too many times because of the technique. So I get really low. And back when I was playing in South Africa, you could lift people and put them in the ground. Now, of course, you've got to be a bit more safer with that. But no, I've definitely been rounded like a park car on a few occasions.
I would say you're a bit of a magician then doing that. You got to remember, guys like Jonah Lomu played sevens in New Zealand, or big guys that went on to have huge 15s careers, played sevens as part of their development. But then there were some guys who used sevens as, hey, I'm going to be a sevens specialist. What do you think about that now, where like in South Africa, I know a lot of them would go through the South African sevens to make it to the Springboks, but now there's specialists, guys who only play sevens.
Yeah, so I will say that countries like New Zealand, particularly when Sevens started on the series, they used that as a platform and a springboard to develop their 15-a-side players, because sevens gives you all the skill sets, the open space with attacking, and as you mentioned, defensively, you're going to have to mark somebody within about a 10-meter channel. So if you can be a very good sevens player or develop your skills there, you generally will be an excellent 15s player. And so that's what New Zealand did. South Africa have had players come through their program, but I think countries like the USA, Canada, other nations that don't have a large player base, a lot of players have been asked to do both. So back in the day, a lot of our sevens guys were playing 15s for the US as well. So that 1 week play 15s, then come back to sevens, then go back. And that's not very good for them because it's very tough to adjust to both codes and hone in your finer skills. Nowadays, I think it's really nice that there's luxury in professionalism in that players can be contracted for a sevens contract and that can be your full-time job. I think that is better for the game. Again, it's up to the player, though, if they want to do both. And with the Olympic Games coming up, I know a lot of 15-a-side players have opted to switch to sevens for a season and try it out. And it didn't work out for some, like Sonny Bill Williams at the last Olympic Games, players like that. Yeah. It's very tough to go from a full-time 15s environment to a game of sevens that has changed a lot over the years. And also, I will say, the best teams on the series are teams that have chemistry. And you develop that chemistry over years of playing with the same people and becoming friends with them. Just to parachute a player in is very tough, you know?
So let's move on. Thank you, Dallen. Let's move on a little bit to Maccabi USA and how you found out about that first and, you know, and some of your highlights with Maccabi USA.
Yeah, so interesting enough, my uncle went to Israel in 1981 and played for South Africa, played in rugby and won a gold medal. Now, again, I was only born in 79, so I didn't know too much about that. But when I came to the US, Kevin Armstrong was a player that played for the team I was playing in. And he mentioned in 2009, around about that time period, that he was going to go to Israel and represent the Maccabi side. And so I thought that was absolutely brilliant. I reached out to Sean Lippman and to the coaching crew and was ready to go. But then I had so many other sevens commitments that I wasn't able to make that trip. And so finally, when 2013 came around, I'd retired from playing international rugby and had an unbelievable journey preparing and trialing out with 80 or 100 Maccabi players, and getting to meet people from the same background was really special. And then to tour Israel, to do Israel Connect, and get connected with my roots. I've never been on a team that has been selected, on your background and your culture and your history, and that was something very special, very emotional. And so playing in that tournament in 2013, it was unlike anything else. And while it was different compared to playing in front of Hong Kong, in front of 50,000 people, I felt like the team was way more connected and it had a lot more meaning, if you will, So, and it was great to win, and we lost some games, that really wasn't what it was about. It was meeting your teammates and other sports and other people that have similar backgrounds to you. So those were definitely highlights for being in Israel, my very first time ever. And then I got a chance in 2013 to go to the Pan American Maccabiah Games and coach and play a little bit. And I'll tell you a funny story, Buzz. So I was only going to play in the sevens tournament. There were 15s and sevens on the go. Aaron Davis, I was coaching with him, known as the donkey because he's pretty slow. But anyway, 20 minutes into the game, unfortunately our side is not doing so well. A lot of younger players and very excellent players, but we're just getting blown out. And so he just turned to me and said, "Get your boots on, you're going in." And I was like, no, donkey, I'm only playing in the sevens. In that tournament, I had to play far more games than I would have liked to, but it was another special group of players and again, brilliant memories.
Yeah, and those guys will get that. And the teams that, I played in 89, I still talk to those guys. It's unbelievable. And that was so long ago. But it is something that's a family without a doubt. And, you got to experience it. You got to, do some special things with it as well, with the delegation, the U.S. delegation in Israel and in Pan Am. So, thank you for that. And I know it was big for the Maccabi USA Rugby to have international players on the team. But I look at that 2013 team, and I have to tell you, it's probably the best bronze medal winning team that ever played in Maccabi, in the Maccabiah for 15s. Sevens, again, we had a strong sevens team and we got the job done there. 15s didn't get the job done, got the bronze. That was an outstanding team and quite a lot of talent on that team.
No, it certainly did. And we didn't even have Zach Test. Zach and I had come from the Sevens World Cup in Russia.
Right,
and Zach had hurt his hand. That's right. Yeah. So our sevens side would have had three current sevens players in the same side. But again, that was just a brilliant experience. I will say that the level of competition was way more difficult than anybody would imagine. The Israel side was superb. Australia was excellent that year. But it was really special to watch you guys carve it up and win gold at the last event,
Yeah, I mean, listen, and you know that once you're part of that, you're part of it forever, and everyone who's played relates to you from, you know, forever. It's a good group. So as a player coach, so you and you know, I know AD and you were coaching there, but you've also done some other coaching. You've run some youth programs and, you know, Play Rugby USA and things like that. Why broadcasting instead of coaching? How'd that all happen, Ned?
Well, I'll first touch on the coaching side of things. I was blessed to be able to work for Play Rugby USA in Los Angeles, working with young inner city boys and girls using rugby as a vehicle for social change. And that's an aspect that's really close to my heart, coming from South Africa where there was so much racial division and a lot of problems in society. And I did see firsthand during the 1995 Rugby World Cup when Nelson Mandela, he came out of prison after 27 years and forgave the people that put him in there. And when you really think about that, it's really unfathomable that somebody is willing to forgive and be able to do that. And he used rugby as a vehicle for change in South Africa. And so carrying that with me, you know, as a young person coming to America, if there was one way I could contribute to society, it's through sport and definitely working with young people. And so that really was a wonderful program. We were able to grow it from 200 kids to 5,000 kids over the 7 or 8 years time period. And seeing those kids compete and have fun and learn about life lessons was absolutely brilliant. And that, I think, is the main point about sport, is that it helps you develop as a human being and helps you deal with certain situations. And the great thing about like an organization like that, and I know Stuart Crone works with ISEF, another brilliant initiative.
By the way, he's on. He wants to know.
I know. He's been drinking.
Unmute
Ignore him.
and let loose, but not yet.
No,
Stu.
mute him. Keep him on mute.
Hang on, Stu. He's drinking too.
Exactly. The brilliant thing is that it mimicked a sevens tournament, if you will, because you'll play 6 games in a day during these flag tournaments. And the point of those 6 games was that you're going to win some and lose some. And that's where your development really happens, is when you experience a loss. And so if you're able to deal with that, the ups and downs, the highs and lows, that translates to life as well. And so that's what I love about coaching. I coached the college side as well, Occidental College. And I loved 15s was great and it was awesome, but I love coaching sevens because you get to hop into practice. You get to, you know, show a couple of moves and sevens is easier as well for the players to develop. So that was absolutely brilliant. It definitely is a passion of mine, but commentating, I think it kind of, for me, it came even easier, right? To be able to talk about rugby and get paid for it. I mean, that's unbelievable, right? So I started traveling a lot with the commentating. And so I couldn't take my coaching jobs. You know, I wouldn't sign up for something I couldn't do properly. So that's kind of with the direction I took, Buzz. I was having so much fun on the broadcasts and particularly, you know, throwing in a few one-liners and a few jokes here and there. And they seem to be received, you know, fairly well. So that's why I continued.
So that happened, right? And, you know, leading into it though, did you start out as a color analyst or play-by-play? And so how did that happen? And then I do want to get into a bit of, you're known for your one-liners. You're known for the nicknames, not just with our groups, because we have great nicknames with our groups and you've given lots of them. But you've even had things go global or viral, whatever, with some of the comments you've made in games, and then they become part of memes or other things or whatever, or videos. So let's get a little bit of some of your favorite, let's do one-liners first, because, you know, and by the way, to t-shirts, I was gonna wear it, but you know, I have to be careful. I was trying to wear the brand tonight, but this one happens to be the Rugby Corner, the Poison Tour. Keep the change. Wait, keep the change. That's one of yours. Famous, it's on a shirt.
Okay, so what's the question, Buzz? Spit it out.
So give me a couple of your favorite one-liners that have sort of put you on the map of that, so to speak, and the ones that have really gone viral.
So, well, I'll say this, right? So, you know, when you're a player on the rugby field or you're playing sports, you're able to express yourself in the sport. And I feel that as a commentator, I grew up as a youngster listening to all commentators and a lot of sports. But when I remember this one vivid memory I think I was like 10 years old. My grandfather gave me a VHS tape back in the day. That dates my age, but it had 101 tries on it, and it was a British and Irish Lions playing. Was the home unions, all that kind of UK based, and a few South African tries. And I remember watching that one VHS, the only one I had, over and over again, so much so that I could commentate the tries when I put it on mute. And so that's kind of how I kind of started getting involved, I suppose, in the commentary of it. But I felt that if I was able to bring passion to the game, which is already very exciting, but keep the audience slightly entertained, and every now and again throw in something humorous. You don't want to be a cliche of one-liners going back and forth. And in some big moments in the game, there is the right time and right opportunity to throw something in. And the first few years, I just tried and experimented. And to answer your question, I was an analyst role, a color commentator, if you will, which only talks when there is a replay or the game has stopped. But my real passion, as you can see now, is non-stop talking, which is when the game is live, the ball is live, and you provide the running commentary, the lead commentator, if you will. And so the Rugby World Cup in Japan was an unbelievable experience to be a part of. And as a young person dreaming of playing in a World Cup, to commentate that was even more special, because World Rugby only selected 4 lead commentators for that job. Meanwhile, if I was to play for a country, you bring 30 in a squad, right? So it was even harder to be a commentator, and I couldn't believe I was selected. But I knew that I had to use the opportunity, and one per game, I would throw in one line just to, so I could put my stamp on a match. Because I know that they don't want you just throwing humorous lines as frequent as possible. So I suppose a couple that I enjoyed, one of them was a South African game. The scrum half scored a hat-trick, but Kobus Reinach, I said, is more dangerous than climate change. When he scored,
Barry just mentioned that one.
One of his tries. And then the other one I liked was, and some of these lines they happen on the spur of the moment, but others you can think about it ahead of time. So the one I thought about ahead of time was Japan was playing Samoa. There was a 50,000 seater stadium packed, and it was unbelievable because those Japanese fans arrived 7 hours before kickoff. We weren't even there. We're the broadcasters. We're like, we have to be there super early, get all the technical things organized. And so when they opened the gates to the stadium, they're flooding in. They were just absolutely fantastic. So imagine the crowd going wild. Japan needed to score 4 tries to keep their hopes alive in the tournament to make the quarterfinals. They had scored 3. The play was finished. Time was up, but it was a final moment of the game. Samoa had possession. They had a scrum near their line, and they gave up possession. And Japan, the winger got it. Kotaro Matsushima scored in the corner. So I had to come up with something big. And luckily, I had thought of a line earlier in the tournament, and the timing was right, and the moment was right to keep it in your back pocket, if you will. And so I said, Kotaro Matsushima, he's so scary. Freddy Krueger has nightmares about him. So some people like it, some people don't. I mean, I just got to have fun with it. So there's definitely some lines. Yeah.
More steps than the Great Wall of China.
Yes, I saw that. Mikey put it up there. That's definitely, I love that line. I think as far as earlier one-liners go, that's definitely one of my favorites as well.
Well, I also noticed, though, that when you were commentating maybe a competition or Sevens out in Glendale, Serevi Sevens, some of these things, you would just go nonstop, start to finish nicknames. When you had the college players and you could kind of identify them by their hair or beards or sideburns, all that, you'd go. And then when you started doing the big games, you kind of waited and inserted them in. So that was really good stuff that you didn't stop doing it completely, but you were able to fit in at the super professional level and still have fun, good rugby fun.
Yes, exactly, Buzzy. And you're so right. So like tournaments that are like the Rugby Town Sevens, they encourage you to have fun. They're like, say what you want. And so I actually have to then, because you can't really on the spur of the moment come up with a million nicknames and a million one-liners. So I do have to like really do my homework and get some stuff prepared. But you're right. It is fun calling people like, oh, here comes the potato, just because, they look like one, right? So that's fun. I love using animal metaphors. One of the funniest nicknames, I think it's funny, other people might not, is Gavin Diamore Morrison in his bio wrote that he somehow blended a chicken into his smoothie. So he had a blended chicken smoothie, which is terrible. I can't believe he even wrote that. So I called him the chicken smoothie during the tournament, and I think that was a big hit and a pretty random nickname.
Oh boy. Oh yeah. Well, and we also know, you can't give every guy a nickname, but every guy remembers if you did give him one, even if it didn't stick or whatever. Sam Harrison saying goodbye to everyone, said he had to run, but his nickname his first nickname from you, Dallen, was Ron Burgundy.
You stay classy, and he was very classy.
Right, stay classy, Sam. And so that stuff really goes a long way in making rugby more entertaining. So hopefully on the sevens, I noticed that as well. In the sevens circuit, it's a much more fun broadcasting environment, even than the 15 stuff is much more buttoned down, serious production. Yeah.
Yes, you're 100% right. So how it works is ahead of every tournament, we have a production meeting. The director, we'll talk through things we need to highlight, potential players we need to highlight, milestones, and then also just the atmosphere and the vibe we're trying to get. So while they don't want a million one-liners and jokes, they want it to be fun and to be that. And the partnership you have with your co-commentators, that is something special too. So it reminded me of touring or playing, traveling around the world, but now doing it as a commentator is like really fun and really cool. Like I always remember traveling with my bags, and I got my like commentators' notes, and I'm like, I'm getting flown around the world to talk about rugby and to share into the fun. Like there's nothing greater. It's just unbelievable. And then of course going to tournaments like Cape Town that have 50,000 people there per day, or Hong Kong, those big ones to commentate, those are lifelong dreams as well. And to be able to do them, it's just so special.
But you're studying and preparing. It's not like you just turn up and start talking.
Correct, Buzzy.
Really study.
Exactly. A lot of people ask me, like Major League Rugby, do you just arrive and work for those 2 hours? Well, it's not that at all. I mean, if you really want to be a well-researched commentator, you spend 3 or 4 days in the week leading up to the match covering both sides. So not only have you got to cover, so let's say like I did the New England game, the Free Jacks against Rooney. So you have to learn everything about New England, and maybe even, if there's going to be a one-liner, it's got to be appropriate to New England. You'll learn about all the players, the coaches, their backgrounds. And of course, you won't have it all to memory. You'll have your notes, and I have detailed notes that I print out. But you'll learn both sides and the significance of the game, how they sit in the league. And so there's a lot of prep work. And when the sevens rolls around, 16 countries are playing, or even worse, when we had combined tournaments. And I say worse because you're preparing for a women's tournament and a men's tournament, and you could commentate any of those teams. It's not like I can prepare for half the teams knowing I'm going to do them on day 1 or day 2. They could get knocked out, and day 3 you call, any one of the sides. So that is a lot of work, and the more time you put in, the better prepared and the better you sound as well.
Yeah, and listen, you guys are definitely prepared. I can tell when you go at it. You even get the pronunciation of the Fijian rugby players' names that the guy could tell it to me 10 times and it's hard to repeat it. It's unbelievable, and you've got them all down. Thanks,
Buzz. I will say that's because people do ask about the hardest names to say, and the Polynesian names are generally easy, is some Tongan and Samoan names, but some of the Fijian names are so tough to pronounce, and especially when Fiji throw the ball around, you have to remember 7 of the players' names that are on the field, and then they switch out with their reserves flying around, and it's tough. I phonetically write them out, and they take up the whole page just to say their names.
All right, so I did want to get into a couple other questions before we throw it out to some of the folks on here. Just a couple of the other questions that have come in, or that I thought about, how you've been sort of handling the current situation, COVID-19, current life. There's talk of return to play, some countries, but of course you were going to be traveling to all these MLR games, doing all that. So maybe, how you're keeping busy during COVID-19, and and maybe anything new, any new projects you've got going on.
Yeah, Buzz. So you're right. So my schedule was packed for 5 months in a row, doing Major League Rugby games. In fact, this past weekend, I would have done a game on Saturday, Sunday, and Monday in 3 different states. So it would have been a lot of travel. So I actually am thankful that it's calmed down a bit, which is nice, but not that it's calmed down completely, because I was meant to go to Singapore and Hong Kong to do those tournaments, which would have been epic, and of course a few other events later this year. But be that as it may, it's given me opportunity to work on other things and to develop new skills. And one of them is doing a podcast. And even though I love talking, I just thought a podcast might be a hassle to set up, but it's actually been fairly easy. And it's called the Rugby Hive. It launches in June. And we've recorded about 24 episodes already with international coaches or players, current and former ones. And so that's been a real joy also to catch up with friends that you've either played with or played against and have a chat for about an hour. delve into their stories and their lives and how their upbringing, and some fascinating stuff. And it's actually given me some good insight for when I do commentate some of these folks later on the series, you know, so that's kind of been good about that. But I will say
tease some of the names, or can you give us a little?
Sure, absolutely. So names like I suppose from the New Zealand side, like Carl Tanano, my friend that I commentate with, Frank Bunce, a famous All Black centre, Joel Stransky, who I work with in Japan, and then a bunch of US and Canadian legends and things like that, you know. So it's pretty.
Stransky,
pretty
who
cool,
happened to win a World Cup with a drop kick. That Joel Stransky.
Yes, that's right. Well, and not only that, that's the one I spoke about where, you know, it really united the nation in South Africa at the time, you know, with Nelson Mandela being in power. So Joel, absolute idol. Joel actually went to the same high school I went to, which was really random and kind of cool. And so he was just a brilliant person to connect and tour with. And that's kind of why it's nice to be able to stay in the sport of rugby, because you know all these people from a young person growing up, but to get to meet them now as a commentator is really cool.
All right. So again, you're home. I know you've been pretty good about staying home, doing all the social distancing things, right? But I think the boredom might have been getting to you, because I saw a highlight of you doing play-by-play of your neighbors, like entering or their groceries into the house or something like that. Is that how boring it's got for you?
Well, Buzz, I'll tell you what. So there was there's a guy called Nick Heath on social media that was commentating, you know, average day things. And so I kind of figured, oh, well, that's pretty cool, because again, we have no real work to do, so we might as well get that going on the crack. So that's been good. You know, I will say, Verity, my wife, she, you know, she doesn't love that I'm talking so much all the time at home. It's easier when I travel, because then she can just turn the TV off, right, and put me on mute. That's much easier.
And some people might ask, who's the better commentator between you and Verity? Because some people might know Verity Explains is quite popular on its own already, right?
Yes, exactly. No, we definitely have a laugh. I think that's the most important thing. But Verity is she's hilarious. She cracks me up every day. We love doing little videos together. She loves teasing me with a bunch of different Instagram things she's got going on. I don't know what's coming left or right, but she's hilarious. And
Dallen asks her about rugby, and she'll say, "I like the green team. I like
exactly.
I like these guys because of this," and she's really good. All right, so that's good insight. Yeah, also seen it's been hot out there, I guess, huh? So you go swimming in the yard, or you guys don't have a pool?
No, we don't have a pool, Buzz, but we have the sprinkler that we put on, and so that's very, very old school, if you will. But the other news is that we're actually moving to the East Coast, so we're going to be closer to family, which is going to be brilliant, and you know, and get some time close to you, Buzzy, actually, which may be a good thing or might not be a good thing.
Oh, it'll be a great thing. So, one last little. What about the gloves? We didn't mention the gloves yet. Does anyone else know about the gloves?
Buzzy, I paid you not to mention the gloves during this little chat. So yeah, so I'll give you a background there. So when I was in South Africa, my roommate at the time was a guy called Brent Russell. He ended up going and playing sevens for South Africa and ended up becoming a Springbok in 15. So unbelievable talent. They called him the Pocket Rocket. And he had some sort of sponsorship with a glove making company to wear these fingerless little gloves. And it was, you know, when he played in Asia or around the world, it's pretty humid. So it helps grip the ball. Anyway, he gave me like 5 or 6 pairs. And for some reason, I chose to wear them playing sevens, because we were in Asia at the Hong Kong Sevens and stuff like that. And it really did help. But they look pretty random. And obviously that's definitely a regret.
And the guys probably gave you a lot of grief over that, huh?
Exactly. To this day.
All right, and how about beach touch? You mentioned it before, and I know there's some other guys on maybe that play beach touch. It's a great thing you guys do to keep busy. I'm sure you miss it. Any plans to get that? What do you think? Will you guys be able to play beach touch again?
Yeah, we'll say the beach rugby, and that's one of the reasons why I've really enjoyed living in LA as well, is for 20 years, we've been going down to the beach and playing in Santa Monica. Guys like Sean Lipman would throw his classic windmill dummy, and people still fell for it after 17 years of him doing it. Gary Putterman and a bunch of legends on the sand. So really such a good time, playing 3 times a week. But no, unfortunately, I won't get a game in yet until we leave. But when we come back and hopefully things are cleared up and everything's good, it's brilliant just to pop down on a Sunday and throw the ball around with friends. Unbelievable setting with everybody coming down and playing. Definitely a good time. We'll get you out there too, Buzz, if you're able to run on sand.
Well, if you can't, next winter, we'll go down to Florida. We'll play beach touch with Greg because they have it going on down there in Fort Lauderdale too. And we were able to get a run one night with Greg and Chase. It was real fun.
Brilliant.
And so, let's see. We've covered a lot of ground on Dallen. Now we've got all these guys on the phone. There's an awful lot of them on there, and there's questions coming in all over the place, I'm sure. But there was one serious question was, how did your Maccabi experience rate versus your many other rugby achievements, so to speak? And I know you talked about what it meant to you and all of that, but, were you surprised by the level of competition, some of those things? What do you think of the whole Maccabi experience, the opening ceremonies, all that?
Yeah, I will say if I take into account the opening ceremony, that was unreal. Having walking out with a USA delegate in front of 40,000 people and all the different teams there as well. I'd never been to a multi-sport event, and so I'd watched the Olympics on television, but in rugby you'd go and play your game and leave. And so being at that tournament was amazing because we went to support the field hockey side, the water polo team, and watch a bunch of different other athletes from the USA and from other countries. And then also getting to do some of the things that you've always heard about, on the Israel Connect, going to your past, going to Masada, going to the Wailing Wall and to all the different places. That really was something special as well outside of the tournament. The tournament itself, as I said, it was different playing in a small arena with a handful of supporters there, but that didn't matter because it was about the players that you're playing with. And you also knew, and this is where we had a special group led by Coach Sean Lipman. We knew that for some of us this could be the last time that we play at this level and play with these players. And I always took that into account when every team huddle I got into. Somebody would say it or I would say it, saying have a look around everybody in this tunnel right now in this group. One of us, this may be the last time we play together. And for example, Aaron Davis, the donkey, that was the last game we played together. He got injured after the first game or 20 minutes. He was a bit overweight at the time, but, did his ankle and he was done. And so you never know when that's going to happen or when you retire. So that really was very special. And where does it rank? It definitely ranks in the top three moments of all time for me.
Yeah, I mean, it is something. The reason I'm still involved with Maccabi USA is probably the feeling I got when I walked into Ramat Gan Stadium back then in '89, and it changed my life, man. It was definitely a big event in that way. But guys like Aaron and what was your favorite? Do you have a favorite nickname from the Israel crew? Do you remember the 2013 Israel crew?
2013.
Stuff that we see 7 years later. What nicknames are we still using? And there's
probably so many, Buzz. There's so many nicknames. There was that group 2013, and then the group in 2015. I think we gave quite a few more nicknames to them. Yeah. To be honest, we probably can't mention a lot of them on air, But
good show.
There've definitely been some good ones in the past. I will say that for sure.
Good show.
But right now, Baz, I would probably nickname you the Lobster. That probably be more appropriate.
Yeah, I've been in the sun quite a bit out there.
Baz, we have a real question here. What's my advice for aspiring broadcasters? That's great from Shane. So a lot of people do reach out to me and ask me, how do you get into commentating and where do you start into broadcasting? And my advice to them always is watch a game or have whatever sport it is. And if it's rugby, you can turn the volume down and you record yourself commentating of a game that's already been played. Now, you may know the result of the game. That doesn't matter. You can then listen back to see how you sound. And that's your starting point. And then once you get a bit more experience, commentate your local team playing. So let's say you're Buzzy and you coach Mystic River. You can take the footage of Mystic River and commentate over those games live or delayed and get experience that way. And I'll say your commentating style and the way you speak over air will change over the years as you listen to more commentators and different people. I would say one of my early lessons that I'm still working on now is that I speak too quickly, especially when I get excited. And while you don't want to slow down completely. You still want to keep that energy up. That is definitely a challenge for me, is to be able to do that. And another one is use vocab that's different every time. That's always tough, because when you're a play-by-play or lead announcer, you're just talking the first thing that's in your head because things are happening at the live moment. When you're an analyst or a color role, you have time to think. The replay is about to come up. You can think about what you want to say and who you want to talk about. So writing down, words I normally wouldn't use, different ways to say the same things are definitely things I think could help any broadcaster.
Good stuff, man. Oh, by the way, you did that MLR game, New England versus New York. So I went looking for you at the stadium, but I was in Vegas for the MLR opener, but you managed to do a remote broadcast, which are things you guys can do nowadays. So you were actually doing the broadcast from where?
Yeah, so that was a unique situation. So basically what happened is there was a major rugby game in Vegas, as you said, and flights were booked and everything, but my color commentator wasn't able to make it. And so the fact that he wasn't able to make it, they had to scramble, and they found somebody who lives in Austin, Texas, Kip McConaughey, lovely guy, great commentator, but he had other work that weekend and couldn't make it to Vegas. So they said, don't worry, there is a remote production facility that Major Rugby uses in Austin, Texas. So I changed my flight to fly to Austin. So he finished his job. He met up with the studio, and we called the game remotely. And I will say, calling remote rugby, and I did a couple of sevens tournaments in Chile and Montevideo, in Uruguay, remotely, very tough, because you can't see, sometimes you only see the camera work, so you can't see the wide angles. So you don't necessarily know who scored. And you also can't really gauge the atmosphere, the crowd and stuff like that so well. So definitely a challenge. But
there was no crowd, just so you know.
No, there's no crowd,
one of the
exactly.
5 people in the
That's
stands.
right. But in today's age, it definitely is an option to call things remotely, and definitely saves you on the travel and everything else like that, particularly now in what we're dealing with,
Yeah. Craig Levein, who happens to be one of the funniest guys to ever play rugby, not just Maccabi USA Rugby, wants to know if you comb your hair with a Snickers bar or if you had your hair on a pillow for 8 hours or something like that.
I think, Bazzy, that question was probably directed at you. But yeah, Craig Levein, he does ask about if I'd heard of Maccabi Rugby before I was involved, and what I thought of it. Craig obviously is a brilliant guy on and off the field. I'd heard a bit about it, Craig, growing up in South Africa. I'd never attended any of the games, but I knew it was something that I would love to have been involved in if selected. And that group in 2013 with Sean Lippen gave me a chance to experience that. And I would like to be involved again in the future, maybe in a coaching or commentating capacity, depending on travel and everything else in that line. It's something that's definitely close to my heart, and I'd love to, do more of the alumni events. I know in Las Vegas we had that event last year, and it was great to attend that.
Yeah, we want to keep doing those. So that and that is good stuff. I think Craig Levein is one of the guys that doesn't have. Look at me. Someone said, "Oh, give Buzzy a nickname." That is my nickname, and Schlumpy's on, and we have a bunch of guys that got nicknames before the Dallen Stanford era. And Craig Levein probably needs a new nickname, so we'll have you let's work on a nickname for Levein, and let's see if we can make it stick.
That's easy, Buzzy. Buzzy, got a couple other questions here. We might as well go through. And then someone says, do I have a pre-game ritual for broadcasting? Yeah, so drinking tea and stuff like that to kind of help your voice, throat coat tea and stuff like that is something I'd certainly do. And I run through the players, the team sheets, the names, just to kind of get familiar. And it's kind of interesting because initially I was nervous to be on air, and because it's a big deal, particularly like with the Rugby World Cup, they have like a 30-second window and it winds up, and then boom, all of a sudden, you're live and it's just you, right? And you got to go. And if you stumble across a word or you say something incorrectly, that's always tough, But a lot of people after games and things like that, if it's a sevens tournament, and I say to them, guys, I'm not going to come out, I need to rest the voice, or just rest for the next day, they laugh at me. They're like, that's hilarious. Like, what are you talking about? What people don't understand is that the negative effects, which I did find out during one tournament, I went for, a quick catch up with people. you speak in a higher voice, a higher level, because everybody's out and about at a bar, or it's getting loud. Then your voice gets tired. You've been speaking all day. That's what you do as a profession these days. And so the fact that you're talking for an extra hour or two, it does put a strain on your voice. And then on a day 3 of a tournament, your voice can sound scratchy or strained. And especially when you want to boom and get those loud kind of, impact moments out. And so that's something definitely to be wary of. And I'd rather let people say, oh, it's a pity Dallen didn't come out, but do a great job in my commentating, because there's always going to be time to hang out and have a few laughs and a jars when that's all done,
Yeah, I'm sure everywhere you go, people want you to meet up and go out because people from all over the rugby world. All right, so as I think the guys have behaved really well. I don't know about you, Dallen. Are you surprised?
No, not surprised at all. Of course, there's a classy folks joining in. Some good, honest questions, and it's brilliant to have Jordan Weinstein on here as well. He was presented us with our gold and bronze medals.
He's the godfather of
That's right.
Maccabi USA
Exactly.
Rugby, and he's the guy who's responsible for me being here as well. And Jordan is a legend among legends.
Yeah.
And so it was good to see. He sent me that shot of you getting your MVP trophy and medal from him. It's kind of nice. He's been involved with Maccabi USA and Maccabi World Union in the competition side. So really good stuff.
Yeah, no, absolute legend. And there's a question here from Craig Levein asking what product I use for my hair. Well, Craig, when you have hair on your head, you can choose anything you want, my friend.
Yeah, no songs from me tonight. You can hear.